All right, we are live. Austin, although actually we're not live, but we are going to be on live soon. Welcome everybody to the first ever episode of GTMN. What is GTMN? Go to Market Media Network. I don't know. Maybe it'll become something. But the goal is to cover the latest news in go-to-market tech, martech, ad tech, sales tech, all of the stuff that's happening to help brands go to market. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We've got Austin, who has a wealth of experience in this domain, and I'm Pranav. And, we're going to skip our backgrounds and intros because I think the first few people who listen to this will probably all be our friends. So thank you for listening in. But let's just get into it, Austin. So I want to start with what's happening with OpenAI this week. Oh my God, I can't imagine this is literally just a 3-year-old company. I know that they have a long history, but really, commercially, it launched November of 2022 with ChatGPT. And
Mhm.
here we are in 2025. And the pace of innovation is just mind boggling. So I'm going to read out what they just launched, right? So at Dev Day 2025, OpenAI introduced the ChatGPT native app directory and SDK, enabling third-party apps to embed deeper into the chat interface. And they, had some examples of Spotify and Canva and Zillow. That's some people are calling it the App Store moment. I'm curious what you think. Do you think it's as big as the App Store moment for Apple, or what's your take?
Yeah, actually, the whole time I was thinking about the headlines from GPT, I was remembering a blog post that Brian Balfour put out in June, and it's called The Next Great Distribution Shift, and strongly recommend everybody read it. Not only because Brian's an awesome guy, but because he basically predicted exactly this. So
Nice.
first is the mode is happening, which is GPT. Now they're opening the gates, which is they're allowing people to build apps on their platform. And eventually they're going to close that for monetization. So if the prediction is correct, they're doing what many other platforms have been doing for a long time, which is they're building a platform, inviting developers and other people to build on top of them. And then eventually they will monetize that. And the monetization could be in a variety of ways. It could be by building apps themselves that take over existing apps. Like, for example, if they have an emailing app, do you need Gmail anymore? They could be monetizing through ads. They could be monetizing through data. But this 3-step pattern of build the moat, open the gates, close for monetization. Brian talks about this, and he talks directly about how GPT and others have come before it. Even LinkedIn right now, we're seeing this where LinkedIn kind of figured out in the last 3 years that people want to talk about business on their platform. And so they invited a bunch of creators to start creating content. And there was this heyday period between 2020 and 2023 even, where all of a sudden everybody has 30,000 followers on LinkedIn or
I
100,
know.
and articles would get 50,000 impressions per post. But now all of a sudden that's not true.
Gone are those days. Oh my God.
And
Yes. I look
and
at my
there's a
impression
boost
count.
button
Yeah.
on top of every article, even if you're an individual.
Yep.
You can pay to boost your articles to get more likes. So
Yep.
I think this is a very common platform play that we're seeing. And to be frank, I don't know if there's any way to resist it, because if your
Yeah.
competitors buy into the platform, you're going to get left behind. That was maybe the most salient takeaway I had from that piece that Brian wrote is yeah, what are your options to resist? Okay, well, guess what? If you resist, your competitors are going to do it, and and unless you have enough staying power to stay off the platform, kind of effed.
Okay. No, I completely agree. I think you kind of have to be in the ecosystem because you don't know where the ecosystem is going to go, right? And how quickly it's going to mature. There's an interesting point here, though. When I look at the type of apps that they launched with, right? They had Zillow and Booking, they had Spotify, they had Canva. And I'm also thinking about they have 800 million, monthly active users, I think. That's what the publicly sort of stated number is. And I have to assume that they want apps that are going to get mass adoption. So they're probably looking at consumer and prosumer apps. So for a single person use case. And most of the effort is going to be that. And then they also launched AgentKit, and I was checking it out yesterday. And that's basically more the enterprise play, which is, hey, you can now create agents. So these are not apps, these are agents. This is like workflows, Zapier, NA10, AirOps, right? All of these folks.
Yeah.
And
Somebody was
you,
trying to convince me that it's not competitive to Zapier. I'm like, okay.
the difference was interesting because I was watching the video and I was like, oh, can I go in and create an app for Paramark, right? and something that I can use internally. And then I realized you use the visual canvas to build it, but then I have to use the code export and put it into a product, or I have to get their snippet and sort of embed it through what they call ChatKit. So it's actually a developer product still. It's not end user product, which might be the distinction between Zapier and A10 and where they have, what they're doing with the AgentKit, which is interesting. So they're going after the consumer with the apps. They're going after the enterprise with AgentKit and ChatKit. I
Mhm.
mean, it is just mind-boggling to me. Like, it's just, oh my God, what is happening with this company? I definitely feel the $500 billion valuation that they had in the secondary feels like the right level of valuation. I can't imagine them sort of not being able to monetize all this in a pretty significant way. Um,
Yeah, although
do you see it the same way, the consumer and enterprise thing, or what's your take on that piece?
yeah, I'll comment on it. I would say like there are some financial analysts right now that are getting the skeezies over the fact that they're basically minting all these partnerships with massive companies, which it could be propping up the economy right now. So is the valuation correct is kind of hard when, it's muttered by the fact that you have billions and billions of dollars in agreements with Oracle and Nvidia and now AMD and others.
AMD.
It's really hard to know exactly if the valuation is correct, but I do think like probably up and to the right is fair. I'm not so sure if I would necessarily get in now. Kind of like the same of getting in crypto too late. But back to your point about consumer versus enterprise, I think you're exactly right. And I don't know how much power companies have to resist other than partnering. Because again, it gets back to the point where it's like if you don't embrace the ecosystem and try to build on top of it, you could get left behind. In the same way, if you don't embrace a new marketing channel, you can get left behind and other people will eat your lunch. So I'm not really sure what options people have other than to try and test, which is interesting. I mean, I'm sure you see it. HubSpot seems to be leaning in really, really hard in the partnerships with ChatGPT, more so I'd say than what I've seen from Salesforce.
Correct.
And this is
Yep.
relevant just to the marketing ecosystem. I see the CTO of HubSpot talking literally on a daily basis about how to build with OpenAI. And so that's one clear strategy, which I think is actually interesting because my guess is that Dharmesh is betting Salesforce is not going to be able to keep up. So since he has such a strong LinkedIn presence and he's able to publish quickly about new capabilities on ChatGPT, it's almost like a marketing cycle. I don't actually even know how much people are using GPT, for example, to query and use their HubSpot data, but it's a great hype cycle.
It is a great hype cycle. Good point. And I'm also thinking about, say, from a marketing and sales perspective, I don't think that there's going to be apps within ChatGPT that are helping marketers or salespeople like with their workflows. Maybe there's like some content production stuff, right? Maybe you start seeing, a very quick way to create a static ad or a video ad using Sora 2. Like Sora 2 is an app inside of Chat. I guess it is already, right? So you can imagine some like use cases like that, but I think the real enterprise stuff is going to be with that, ChatKit, AgentKit stuff, where all the, go-to-market tech companies start to leverage AgentKit to build agentic workflows within their product. That's like the most, interesting thing that's going to happen. And so just like you had you could plug in intercom into your product to do support queries, right? You'd be able to plug in some other type of agentic workflows in your products to answer natural language queries about whatever your product is, or
Yeah.
things of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, because my understanding of AgentKit is it's effectively like a canvas for creating multi-agent workflows. So like many, many tools right now have canvases for workflows. It's like there's almost an overabundance of enterprise tools with a little WYSIWYG editor where you drag and drop things around. And so what can be interesting about this is like, does it actually get rid of all those? Like, does it create a
Yeah,
central place or a central way to do workflows across any tool? That's actually one of the hardest, maybe not the hardest, but one of the most challenging things in MarTech is the
I
fact
agree.
that you have data flows and then you have action flows. Whenever I talk to people about setting up systems, I always talk about, hey, data should move from the top of the funnel to the bottom. And most people want to deconstruct their stack and have data flowing into their warehouse. And we've kind of seen that evolution of the warehouse first approach to marketing data. But what's never been solved and what's very hard is that you can create workflows in all these different tools, You can create audiences in all these different tools. And so like a human thing that happens is I often have to tell people like, hey, don't use all 5 tools to create workflows. Create
Yeah.
workflows in one single tool, whether that's Salesforce or internally. I literally just talked to a client yesterday, a company called A to B, and they were dealing with this exact issue where they have a bunch of workflows built in code that's managing data flows and transitions between data. And they also have HubSpot and they also have another tool. And one of the things I've warned about is like if you actually start using a tool like HubSpot or another tool, create workflows, and you also have code creating workflows, you've now put yourself in a position where it can be impossible to debug what's happening inside your toolkit. It can be really impossible to know what is changing what data. So as much as possible, you actually want to centralize workflows in a single spot. And maybe with AgentKit, again, if you invest in a world where everything's built in AgentKit or a single tool or a single platform like OpenAI, does it actually make switching costs between vendors go to zero? Um,
Mm.
Historically has been the hardest piece of switching costs. Think about like a CDP, a CRM, an attribution tool. It's not hard to move your data. You can pull all your data into the warehouse and
Right.
move tools. What's hard is if you have things that are built in the third party tool that then you have to transition to another third party tool or another system. So,
This makes me think, Austin, you're absolutely right about having a central sort of workflow tool. I wouldn't be surprised if Snowflake enters the game, where because they have all of the data, that they open up an agentic workflow on top of that, or they buy one of these companies, right?
oh,
Where
Fivetran,
very good point, Fivetran, yeah,
Five acquired Census. They
right.
news out yesterday. They acquired DBT. I
But they
think that
acquire. Did that just happen? Did they just acquire DBT?
yeah, that's the news that dropped yesterday. Fivetran to acquire DBT.
Wow. All right, breaking news. Amazing. I want to change gears a little bit to Sora 2 and Pulse because that's also like stuff that's happening in the OpenAI world. Today is the first day when I'm feeling sad being an Android user because I don't actually have access to Sora 2 on my phone. So I haven't played around with all the crazy stuff that you can do. But with Sora 2, and with the new Pulse feature, and you hear Sam Altman kind of change his tune a little bit about advertising through these platforms. I
Mm,
think the next 12 to 18 months see multi 100 million weekly active user platforms like Sora, like Pulse, and they are going to launch ads. Like that's like who's that person? Like I think the ex Instacart and Meta woman, Fiji. I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name.
which
Fiji, right?
we got to spend some time here. She came out of nowhere. It feels like, but everybody I talked to says she's been a force of nature for a long time. But I feel like I'm just catching up.
And so she's now running all of I think the consumer apps, if I'm not wrong, and building out an ad network within OpenAI. So marketers, if you're listening to this, like you better stay on top of this because the day it launches, you're going to have some arbitrage opportunities. So don't be, on the back foot of this one. Like whenever Sora 2 or Pulse launch ads, you want to be there like day one. And,
Percent. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah. I mean, I, and so I think it's like probably 0% chance that they don't go deep into ads. I mean, Sam Altman like basically didn't deny it, which means of course it's going to happen. But I think they're right now in the context gathering stage. They have like a multi-pronged approach to monetization, which you're seeing, right? Like they have the ability to create a workflow platform. They have the agent and an AI SDK. They have the chat SDK. So they have an ability to go into the enterprise. They're controlling a platform and creating a marketplace for people, which will then undoubtedly pull people to invest even more deeply in sharing everything inside the platform. I mean, we talked about this earlier. The number one thing that ChatGPT is going for it is that they're gathering more and more context about users. To me, this has
yeah,
always been like some of the trouble with the experience I've had is that I use Claude as well as GPT, but I try actually to not use more than 2 platforms because you actually, as a consumer, you want to invest all in one because then it has all the context. You have all your stuff in one spot, and there should be net benefits from that in the same way that if you invest in the Apple ecosystem, you get net benefits by having more and more equipment attached to a single account. But that's obviously not in Anthropic's best interest. That's not in Grok's best interest. And so their defense mechanism was to create MCP with the idea that like, oh, you can transport context between these providers. So maybe there's some easy switching costs to go from GPT to Anthropic. But I think what they're doing is they're really trying to build things that make it impossible for a user to really use more than one GPT tool. That's what I think is going on with all this stuff. Because if
Oh,
they are going to be
interesting.
an ad network, they need to have as much context as possible in one spot. And if you're split between 5 or 6 different tools, you're creating stuff, that's going to make it hard.
And you'd argue, right, this is the same Google strategy when they had Google Search, and then they introduced logins, and then they introduced Gmail, then they had Google Drive and Calendar.
Oh,
Like, it
yeah.
just had
Oh,
more and more context about you as a user. You were always logged in. And, here we are. Google's a multi-trillion dollar company now. Okay, so talking about ads, a couple of other interesting things that happened. Amex is launching an ad network. And
oh,
PayPal is launching an ad network. This is, Amex is obviously what, a 50, 60-year-old company, and PayPal's now a 25-year-old company. And they're both sort of leaders in their own, ways in payments. And now I'm thinking, oh, damn, is Stripe going to launch an ad network, right? Like, everybody's basically talking about ads as the way to kind of get to that next level of growth, because I have to imagine, even for Stripe and so on, like, if you enter public markets and your growth is like, slowing down because, hey, you've captured all the payments market share, where do you go from there? So again, tip for marketers, like, everything is an ad network these days. It's just hard to
mhm.
ignore. It's like the ultimate business model of the internet. But I was surprised. I did not see that on the cards, that PayPal and Amex are both going to have, their own ad networks. But it seems like a very sensible move.
Yeah. I mean, like tons of large companies like this have ad networks. I mean, Amazon has their own ad network. Walmart has one as well. And what's interesting too is they often use their own inventory for their own advertising purposes, right? So yeah, I'm not terribly surprised by that. It'll be interesting to see what type of ads appear there, though.
I
Just
have
because
to imagine it's gonna be stuff like I'm thinking about, you just bought something through your Amex card. So Amex knows, your purchase history, and maybe, yeah, I guess they do because they're a closed network, so they have all the data. And
yeah.
so and I think they're launching just with Amex Travel, if I'm not wrong, first.
Mhm.
So it's actually just on, their own sort of property. And you can imagine other travel companies doing, targeted advertising on Amex Travel. So that could be a hotel, that could be, airlines, that could be Uber, I don't know. And you're just essentially getting more context on Amex Travel and doing advertising there. And then they open it up for like other, I'm sure they have partners that use Amex for other stuff. And I think PayPal's doing something different where they're saying, if you use PayPal on your, checkout on your website, and you want to use, maybe, I'll give you an example. You complete a transaction, and then there are, hey, people who buy this product also buy these other products. And those
Mhm.
other products could be like other PayPal brands, not just your brand. And so you basically have a recommendation engine, very much like what's happening on Amazon, right? You buy a product and then, like, here's ads for other products. I think that's what's going to end up happening, but yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I always feel like, especially across some of these like subsidiary tier ad networks, I always get advertised for things that I've already bought or I don't need. So
Yeah.
it's like good for them, but for the people that are advertising on it, if I were advertising on it, I'd be asking the question like, how do I ensure that I don't remarket to people who've already bought the product, right? Or who just like don't give a shit.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Okay, so on that point, another interesting data story that launched last week and was getting a lot of attention on LinkedIn and on X. Do we call it X now? We don't call it Twitter.
Still Twitter.
Nobody in my Still Twitter to you?
I'm on Blue Sky now though. I'm not even on Twitter. I have a Twitter account, but like I think I just get like endless conservative troll posts. So I don't even open it unless I'm looking at something. And I opened a Blue Sky account, but I don't know. I feel like I'm too old for this shit. Is that do you,
Okay, so this is exactly my point. So there's a, and we'll put this chart on the video version of this podcast, but there was somebody from the Financial Times that did this study about social media usage
Oh yeah.
over time from like 2014 to 2024. And the global average kind of goes up and to the right all the way up until like 2022. And then it starts declining for the last couple of years. So this is like an individual's usage. And it goes from like 1.5 hours to like some like 2.5 hours. And then like now it's kind of going down. But what's fascinating is, and I hadn't seen this until like this morning when I was kind of just doing a quick research, Europe and APAC are going more down. North America is still going up and to the right, which is fascinating to me. So we're addicted to it.
Fascinating.
But
Terrifying.
But the rest of the world is kind of taking a dip in social media usage. And what that tells me is like when I think about it from a MarTech and sales tech perspective, right? Like what's happening in our world, it's getting harder to grab attention on these platforms, on these social media platforms, because if usage would continue up and to the right, then just by the function of you being on the platform, you're going up and to the right. But if usage is kind of, plateauing or decaying, then I think the auctions for all the advertising stuff are going to get more competitive. Your, rates are going up, so on and so forth. And I think some of that is happening when I talk to like, customers and prospects and media buyers. Everyone's like, yeah, it's getting much harder on social. And there's a movement towards let's do more YouTube and TV and out of home and, things of that nature. But I'm curious what you see or think about that whole trend. Do you think that social is going to start declining?
Look, I think that things are always competitive, and there's only one sure way to build a business, which is to build a great product and get it in the hands of users and have them fall in love with it. And in the process of falling in love with your product, they're probably going to talk about it with other people. And that is the one surefire way to build a great business is build a great product that people love, and the rest will take care of itself if you're patient enough. But as you know, a lot of companies aren't patient, largely because investors aren't patient. So they find themselves in this world of unrealistic expectations from growth that are guided by the companies that we see out in the market right now going from 0 to 500 million. And that's just not realistic for most businesses. Most businesses take a very long time and a lot of hard work to get there. What I kind of sense from a lot of people, both founders and call it mid-level companies, 50 million ARR, is that there's an acceptance of going back to the original way of building a business, which is like
Mhm.
small sample size, small segments, small audiences, hard work, and maybe not as much automation as we think. Certainly, there are ways to build a big business quickly, but I think increasingly because it's harder, there is this question of like, should I just spend the same amount of time doing it the good old fashioned way, finding 500 people and writing them handwritten notes versus spending the same amount of time setting up some machine that emails 100,000 people? Because that worked really well in 2020, 2021, just as an example with cold outbounding, but it doesn't work as well anymore. And I think we're just like in this age of drinking the Kool-Aid where we think that everything has to be programmatic, automatable, and scaled. And that's not always true. And yeah, what's tied to social media too, I just think about like content marketing. Like I think content as an original source of reading in literature is dead. Content as a
Mhm.
source of data for LLMs is totally alive. So like I
Right.
had this conversation with a customer this week where they're like, yeah, we have this PMM who's spending all this time creating like fancy language to describe the product. And it's like, why the fuck are we doing that? Nobody's reading websites. When was the last time you scrolled a website and looked deeply at like all the product offerings? I don't know who the fuck does that. I like I'll only look at a website if I'm gated by the demo button. Otherwise, I'm clicking login, sign up. Let me explore the thing, or let me
Yeah.
ask Google about it quickly if I'm just getting a cursory sense of it. So yeah, I mean, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but what I'm trying to say is yes, social is harder, but everything is harder because people's attention spans are shorter. There's a lot of competition. There's many more channels to cover, and that's why like I keep coming back to the idea of like actually originality and the basics are what I see as being really successful. There's a great podcast with Ethan Smith on Lenny's where he talked
Yeah.
about the AEO strategy. And like a lot of it was like, go make a Reddit account and answer a bunch of questions for people and be honest and authentic. And guess what? That's going to actually do really well because LLMs are looking for those honest and authentic answers. And think about it, like that's what you were doing in 2014. Like back in
Yep.
2014, 2015, I remember our CEO at Branch, Alex Austin, was like getting on Substack and Quora and answering questions. And it was just like, it's just a slog, like him answering
No,
questions.
I think that's my personal experience as well. I think we get a lot of like inbound from just people being like, "Hey, I heard you on this podcast or I saw you respond to this, thing in this community and I really appreciated how you did that." That's absolutely I think the thing that works at the early stage. The trick is how do you to your point, how do you scale it? Right? How do you do that when you get, 10 million, 20 million, you got, 200 employees and I think the answer might be that everybody in the business needs to take that approach,
Yeah.
not just the founder, right? And that's how you scale.
Well, and this is a really important part. This is more of a personal philosophy, which I could totally wrong about, but it's like the teams of the future. I mean, think about the way that you would scale that in a business before the generation we're living in. you would hire your first couple marketers, you do the motion once, you hire a VP or a director, they hire more people, you start to divide into different disciplines, you scale those disciplines by adding more humans. Now I think we're living in a world where, some people think that you scale it all through agents and AI. But my
Mm,
experience is like there's only so much of that you can do. And actually agents are still taking a lot of time. So,
yep.
I've seen this problem at multiple companies now. It's like, yes, you can build 10 agents to do the job of one person, but now that person is managing those 10 agents. So like, I don't know, why don't you just hire another person and do 20 workflows manually versus 10 with an AI agent? And this gets to the point which I'm seeing a lot more operators as marketing teams. Like you have one leader and 10 operators as opposed to these functional area directors because one person can use part of their time with agents to go much further than they would have gone without it. And I'm just seeing as companies grow up, they're trying to hire more exceptional, experienced operators in a domain, knowing that they can probably double or triple their capacity with agents and AI, as opposed to hiring a sophisticated VP of marketing and then building out the team. A founder can
Yeah.
get a lot further with experienced individuals than with a leader. What was a
Yeah.
leader?
No, that's a great one to kind of bring it to a close. I had three other pieces that I'd love to get your reactions on. So the first is, I think LinkedIn is doing an interesting job. So a couple of things that they've launched over the last couple of weeks, I think, or months. One was, I don't know if you've seen this, but you can now go into every post and see if people are saving it or sending it to other people on LinkedIn. The content team that we work with, they pinged me yesterday. I was like, hey, can you see if you have access to this? And I looked at the numbers and I was like, holy shit, this post had 16 saves? What are we talking? How is that possible? And so I think that they're exposing sort of how the algo is working, which is all of the dark social, like, which is like stuff that was not even visible to us, which is kind of cool. And
Yeah.
then, have you, the LinkedIn algo is like a mess in 2025. I'll be honest. Like none of my stuff works anymore on LinkedIn is my feeling. Like it works, but like not to the level that was working in 2024. But I'm curious what your take is on saves and sends. I think it's a great addition.
Man, I have so many opinions about LinkedIn because I feel like I spent the last year and a half like doing the grind, doing the hustle, trying to build the LinkedIn presence. And there are some people who I think have totally figured it out. But what's not visible is that there's a lot of automations running that help people get to 30,000 followers. And then that's it because there's a 30,000 connection limit. And after that, you can only gain followers. So what I always tell people if
Oh,
they're
wait, I did not know this. Wait, you can only have 30,000 connections?
only
What?
30,000 connections, after which point you have to start getting followers. So if you'll see anybody very rapidly getting followers, it's usually because they have a ton of automations running to connect with people, especially business leaders, founders. They have automations running to DM connect with people who sign up for their product or who answer whatever. Like I kind of disqualify people who have less than 30,000 followers. And I start to look to the 100, 150, because at that point, they truly have a following. And I think there is some critical threshold where when you have enough followers, LinkedIn starts to actually push your content to the top because they're looking not at the number of connections, they're looking at the real follower base. And I think people should be prioritizing getting organic followers, not, connections who they're effectively reaching out to because of some event that occurs off the platform. So that's my first point. Second, my point is on the save part and on the view part. I think it's really fascinating. I have struggled to use the save feature because there's so many parts of LinkedIn's platform that are like
Yeah.
brilliant if they just made it easier to use. Like I want to talk to the PM over there who's just like, can we just build a fast loading piece of LinkedIn that has DMs in an organized box, lets you save articles and like reference them and use AI to search them. Because like I actually built an app for myself where I can save LinkedIn content and view it almost like a Reddit stream because I'm going through the day and there's all this interesting stuff that I want to save for later, but I feel like I just forget to and I never go back and read it. And I like, do I keep it in like a notes folder? Like I don't know what the fuck to do with LinkedIn articles. So I think there's a huge opportunity to not only take the saves, but then turn them into like a content library or like a social experience that could then bring in more eyeballs, you know?
I think you're 100% right. And I think there's maybe a micro SaaS idea here. If somebody can figure out when I save something, I don't even think it's available through an API or a Zap, right? Because I looked and it just sends it to some reader. Like I use Readwise for like all content, and it does terribly with LinkedIn content. Like the formatting is off, like it gets it wrong half the time because LinkedIn has just not opened it up.
Mhm.
And I think that's a missing opportunity for LinkedIn and for everybody on the platform. Okay, here's
Oh,
another one. So TikTok is back, right? So TikTok, I think, was announced in September that they are going to be under new ownership with Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX. I have no clue who MGX is,
and
and ByteDance is going to
I
hold.
thought too,
Yeah.
right? Didn't A16Z get a slice of TikTok too? I thought they
Yes,
did.
yes, yes, they did too. Now, okay, what I figured out, and I don't know if most people are, kind of paying attention to this. So Oracle, Larry Ellison's son, is also the owner of Skydance, which just merged with Paramount. And
Hmm.
so I think what's going on here is essentially the Ellison son is basically making a play for a big media holding company
Mm.
across the traditional media and the new media. And that's what we're seeing here. And I don't think most people have kind of connected the dots between all of that stuff that's going on. So imagine TikTok, Paramount, Skydance, all kind of working really closely together and blending like all the IP that you have from those platforms, and then using TikTok to kind of promote those, and vice versa, which I think is a really interesting thing that's going on. And then last piece, and I'll get your reaction. Apparently, Meta is going to take all of the users' AI interactions. I don't even know who uses Meta's AI. Like they talk about like a billion users. I'm like, really? Are people using Meta's AI? And they're
All
going
of
to
our
start
parents.
using it
All of
for.
our parents.
Yeah, exactly. And they're going to start using it for ad targeting and content personalization starting December of 2025. So anything that you put in your Meta AI is now going to get used by the algo. I'm just like, I don't know, man. Meta's kind of lost the plot a little bit on this AI stuff. Even when I look at some of the people who are using Meta's, ad platform, they're like the AI features are just completely getting it wrong these days. Like the graphics are wrong, like it's just all a mess, and people are hesitant to kind of let go of the control of really owning every pixel. So I'm curious, what you think about the Meta stuff and the TikTok stuff.
Mm. Well, on TikTok, that's interesting. I mean, a giant media holding company certainly makes sense. I just think the whole Oracle thing is like strange, and obviously politically guided, right? Like it's pretty obvious. And yeah, I mean, Ellison went on saying that people would be better behaved if there were cameras watching. So it's like I don't. It's
Really,
hard.
he said that?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's like people would probably be better behaved if there was cameras, watching their behavior. I'm like, okay, that's a little too authoritarian for me. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine how TikTok changes dramatically under that leadership regime, right? Like, yeah, and then there's also this question of are we going to face rebellion against TikTok from different groups? Even though you said in the U.S. that social media presence is going up, I'd be very curious to know among which platforms, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know that amongst teens and children, certainly TikTok has been on the rise, but if you look at the millennial generation and folks above that, I don't actually know if that's increasing or not. So that's one thought. And it's kind of related to Meta. Like, so I personally haven't had a Facebook account since 2016, 2017. I think I have
Oh
like a
yeah.
testing account to look at ads, and
Right.
my account is just spam. And I could be a isolated person here, but I almost believe that there's like three groups of Facebook members in the US, right? There are, young folks who feel like they had to sign up for it or signed up
Mm,
inadvertently through something like Instagram, or Threads.
yeah.
So like they have a Facebook account, but are they really an MAU? No, they're an Instagram user. Then there's our parents' generation, the boomers.
Yep.
Mom and dad are prime users of
100%.
Facebook. It's where they find community. And as much as I think it's like a brain rot, sure, they're part of Zuck's audience group. And then I think there's our generation, the folks who grew up on Facebook circa 2000 to 2020, 15-ish. And we all probably have Facebook accounts as lingering, skeletons in the closet, but we're not active users, and they might be connected to accounts like Instagram. Even with Instagram, which I used to be a huge poster on, I feel like I have it. It occasionally comes up on my phone and I'll look at things and then I'll delete them. And yeah, I mean, I think there is a counter narrative to the idea that that social media usage is growing, which is I think there's also a lot of people recognizing the tragedy of brain loss that's happening across social media and AI.
Yeah.
And it's a question of like when people change because these things are inherently addictive and are hard to get rid of. But I do think like at some point there's enough of the population that wakes up and schools are already taking action by not allowing phones in the classroom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, this is not necessarily stuff that marketers love, right? Because our job is to get people's eyeballs and attention. But taking off our hat of marketers and putting on our hats of humans for a second, I think it's like probably better for society if these things aren't as successful, you know?
Totally. I mean, I can totally appreciate that point, right? Which is I have two young kids
Hmm.
and, do I want them to be fully embedded in this online digital world where they're addicted to, all of these different things? Hell no. Like they don't have phones. They barely have, iPads. And, they're engrossed in books. So I have a fun one for the next week's session. We'll talk about book talk. It'll be fun. I'll bring some stats. There's some interesting things that are happening in the mashup between TikToks and books. You'll love
Oh my
this.
gosh. Yeah, I have a friend who's an author and she's like on TikTok all the time. It's like, what? You're promoting reading and you're like slamming the social networks. She's got like 1 million followers on Instagram and like 2 million on TikTok, and she does TikToks about her books. I'm like, I guess these things can coexist, but it's hard. It's hard to like kind of think about of like, okay, well, are people really as innocent as just like watching a couple of TikToks and then going to read? No, they're probably buying the book and reading one book a year and then spending the rest of their time on social media. I read a really sad article that was like Gen Zers are like turning to flip phones and CD players to like escape from from technology.
I mean, listen, Austin, I think there's a huge market. You could easily build I think, a $10 billion company if you had a smartphone that was actually a little dumb.
I mean, as people have tried it, right? It's just hard, right? Like you become accustomed, you become addicted to phones. Phones are inherently addictive pieces of technology.
All right. On that note, first episode of GTMN coming to a close. Thank you for listening, and we'll do this every week. So tune in again for next week's episode. We're going to talk about book talk. We have some like upcoming stuff on Meta's advertising platform. I'm sure some new AI launch is going to happen. We're going to talk about that. So thank you, and see you soon.
Thanks for now. See you, bud.
All right, Austin.